Dear friends, welcome to this week's virtual Drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege of Parshas Chayei. And although the Parsha, of course, is called the life of Sarah, Chayei, we know, of course, the Parsha begins with the tragic episode of the death of Sarah Imenu, the matriarch Sarah. And although Sarah Imenu was privileged to live till 127 years old, a long life, the reason I say tragic is because, as Rashi HaKadosh points out, the juxtaposition of Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, the willingness of Avraham Avinu to sacrifice his one and only son, the willingness of Yitzchak to sacrifice himself, juxtaposed to the death of Sarah Imenu. Rashi quotes the Medrash that says that it was the knowledge, finding out about the Akedah, that somehow was traumatic for Sarah Imenu. Not somehow, was understandably tragic for Sarah Imenu. Parcha nishmasa, her soul leapt out of her body. And as such, we see the end of an age, the end of an era, the first of the matriarchs, Sarah Imenu, who together with her dynamic life partner, Avraham Avinu, created the foundation upon which we build to this very day. And the Torah tells us that upon the passing of Sarah Imenu, Vatamas Sarah, the second pasuk in the parsha, Parachav Gimel pasuk base, chapter 23, verse 2. Vatamas Sarah b'Kiryas Arba. Sarah Imenu died in Kiryas Arba, he Chevron, which is in the city of Chevron, Be'eretz Canaan. Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'lifkosa. And Avraham Avinu came to go and eulogize her and to cry for her. Avraham Avinu, again, a loving, dutiful life partner. Remember again, Avram and Sarah, this was no ordinary marriage. This was no ordinary couple. You have to understand that Avraham Avinu understood that Sarah Imenu was his life partner, to the point that even after Sarah was barren, was infertile for many years, Avram never brought up the idea of marrying another wife to Sarah. It's important to look at the psukim. It was Sarah Imenu who said to Avram, Bona shevchasi, come take Hagar as a wife, might be built up through her. It's interesting, Avraham Avinu never had this idea of taking another wife, because Avraham Avinu, Sarah is my partner. That's it. If we're going to have children, we'll have children. If we're not going to have children, we won't have children. But whatever it is, it's Sarah and I together against the world. Whatever we have to do, it is the two of us. It's such a dramatic part. It's a lesson in partnership, a lesson in marriage, a lesson in building a life together, whether it's good or whether it's difficult, whether it's happy, whether it's sad, whether it turns out the way you wanted it or dramatically different. Either way, this is my partner. This is the person who will be by my side through anything and everything. And therefore, when Avraham Avinu loses his life partner, as Soloveitchik points out, that amazingly enough, we don't really see any more dynamic activity on the part of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, who's everyone, right, everywhere, doing everything, in Gerar, in Mitzrayim. Once Sarah Imenu dies, it's really, so to speak, kind of the end of the Avraham Avinu era as well. He marries off Yitzchak, he goes in and gets remarried himself at the end of the parasha, but that's really it. Because with the death of Sarah Imenu, the death of his life partner, came a certain loss of a piece of himself as well. And therefore the Torah says, Avraham Avinu, again confronting this loss, Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'lifkosa. Avraham Avinu comes to eulogize and to cry for Sarah Imenu. Incredible. What's even more incredible is the very next pasuk. Vayakam Avraham me'al pnei meso, vaydaber al bnei ches lamar. Avraham Avinu gets up, finished crying, finished eulogizing, and he goes to speak to Bnei Ches, ultimately again to Ephron, and to negotiate the purchase of Maras HaMachpelah, the burial cave that would become the burial cave not just for Sarah, but for all of the patriarchs and matriarchs. What's striking about this is the immediacy of it. This was a profound loss, as you just mentioned, a loss for the world, a loss, but the loss for Avraham Avinu was enormous. You know, in general, the Chazal say, Ein meis ela leishto, which literally means one is not dead except for his wife, which is Chazal's way of saying that the person who often feels a loss in the most acute fashion is a spouse. And it's a dramatic idea because, you know, as much as tragic as it is we shouldn't compare loss. Every loss is tragic, but the loss of a life partner, Chazal understood, is acutely tragic. This is the person I started out with. This is the person I built a life with, maybe even built a family with. And now that partner is gone. I expected the rest of my life to live out with this person. We had so many more dreams, goals, and aspirations. And now I'm here to fulfill them all by myself. And especially, as we mentioned before, for Avraham Avinu, how traumatic this must have been. And yet, how much time is devoted to mourning, to eulogizing? Vayavo Avraham, lispod l'Sarah v'lifkosa. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. Half a pasuk. Avraham Avinu comes to eulogize Sarah, to cry for her, and then next pasuk, Vayakam Avram me'al pnei meso. Avraham Avinu gets up, and he goes to negotiate again a burial plot with Bnei Ches. it just seems like a very short amount of time. And we just would have thought that given the enormity of the loss, ultimately, Avram Avinu would have spent more time, and the Torah would have spent more time on the eulogies and loss. By the way, contrast is, for example, go to the end of Bereshis, when Yosef dies. Now granted, Yosef was a monarchical figure. Yosef was the second most powerful man in the civilized world. But the Torah spends an incredible amount of time speaking about the mourning for Yosef, the loss of Yosef, the levaya for Yosef. And yet, again here, when it comes to Avram and Sarah, Vayavo Avraham Lispoda Sarah V'Lifkosa, Avram comes to eulogize, to cry for her, done. Vayacham Avram Penosa, Avram Avinu gets up, begins to negotiate. And the Kotzker, Menachem Mendel of Kotzk, says something so beautiful. Not commenting on this pasuk per se, but commenting on the dynamic of life. And he says something amazing. He says, Yesh Dvarim Sheish Lam Zman U'Makom. There are things in this world that have a particular time and have a particular place. La'ochel Yesh Zman. For example, food has a time. What does this mean? Kisha Adam Tsair Hu Tzarech Le'achol Yoser. When a person is younger, growing, they need to eat more. I get older, I need to eat less. L'shena yesh makom. For sleep, there's a time as well. Now, you would have expected the Kotzker to say, okay, what's the time for sleep? So the time for sleep is at night, right? The person wants to sleep at night. The Kotzker says, no, when's the time for sleep? Bakever. In the grave. In the grave, there's plenty of time to sleep in the grave. Okay, a little bit overwhelming. Sham efshar lishon kama sherotzim. In the grave, you could sleep as much as you want, as late as you want, no problem. Avala atzvos. But the Kotzker says, and again, this is the theme. For everything in this world, there's a time and there's a place. So there's a time for sleep, there's a time for eating, there's a time for working, there's a time for learning, there's a time for davening, there's a time and a place for everything. The Kotzker says with one exception, Avala atzvos, when it comes to sadness, ein lo zman v'lo makom. There's no time that is appropriate for sadness, and there's no place that's appropriate for sadness. Why, says the Kotzker? Me'atzvos lo tzomeach shum davar moil. Nothing positive comes from sadness. Zu eretz tzia b'tzamoves. Sadness is like an infertile field. Nothing could come from it. Nothing could grow from it. And dear friends, what a profound and incredible insight. There is a time and place for everything in this world, says the Kotzker, with the exception of sadness. Because the only thing that sadness yields is more sadness and despair. The only thing that sadness creates is a sense of hopelessness. And where there is hopelessness, there's a profound cessation of dynamic activity. Therefore, says the Kotzker, there is no place and there is no time that is appropriate for sadness. And by the way, if you think about this, it's really incredible. You say to yourself, but that's not true. That's not true. There are times we're supposed to be sad, right? For example, again, Chodesh Av, the 9 days, Tisha B'Av. And dear friends, listen to the words of Chazal, right? What does the Mishnah say? Mishenichnas Av mema'atin b'simcha. When the month of Av comes, what do? We diminish our joy. It doesn't say we become sad. Because says the Kotzker, there is never an obligation to be sad. More than that, not only is there not an obligation to become sad, there is no place, there is no time for sadness. Because sadness, ultimately, like Kotzker says, me'atzvos lo tzomeach shum davar moel. Nothing productive comes from sadness. Nothing germinates in the self-defeating soil of sadness. Nothing good comes from atzvos. All it yields is hopelessness, is darkness, and a cessation of dynamic activity. And perhaps, that's what's happening over here. You don't think Avram Avinu could have lost himself in this loss? You don't think he could have just crumpled down on top of his wife, on top of Sarah Imenu, mourning by her lifeless body, wondering, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after everything we've been through, after everything that's happened, and again, especially if you understand the narrative as Rashi does, that the death of Sarah is somehow linked to Akedas Yitzchak, you don't think Avram Avinu could have lost it? Just crumple down, just almost like roll up into a ball of sadness, rocking back and forth, sobs convulsing his body, the loss of his life partner. Who was going to help him build? Who was going to be his partner? Who was going to help in the raising and maturation of Yitzchak? Yitzchak wasn't a child, but he was still young and still needed his mother. A child always needs his mother. A husband always needs his wife. And people always need their matriarch. And it would have been so easy for Avram Avinu to fall into the clutches of atzvos, of sadness. But Avram Avinu made a dramatic decision. Vayakam Avraham al pnei meso. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Of course, my heart is shattered in a million pieces. Of course, I feel this overwhelming tidal wave of sadness. Of course, I feel like a world that was once filled with so much light is now so much darker for me and my family. Of course, I feel that way. But I can't succumb to it. I can't give into it. I can't allow the emotion of sadness to define my life reality. Me'atzvos lo tzomeach shum davar moil. From sad, nothing good, nothing positive ever comes from sadness. Therefore, Vayavo Avraham l'spolos rav livko. So yes, Avram, of course, you have to mourn. You have to mourn. And there is that period of sadness that must be observed. But after a little bit of mourning, and after a little bit of crying, then Vayakam Avraham al pnei meso. Avram says, it's time to get up. It's time to do. It's time to work. It's time to accomplish. I need to purchase a burial cave, and then I need to continue forward with my life and with my mission. And dear friends, what a profound and overwhelming and incredible life lesson. There are no shortage of reasons for atzlos. No shortage of reasons for sadness. We all have it. We all have it. Whether it's loss, because we lose people that we love, or whether even it's not loss, we all experience loss in different ways. I thought my life was going to be a certain way, and then something happened that derailed me. Or I thought that circumstances were going to evolve and to ultimately come to fruition in a certain way, and they're not. And I'm disappointed. We feel feelings of loss because our health sometimes dictates new realities. Our parnasa dictates new realities. Relationships that I thought were going to be in a certain way didn't quite turn out that way. My career is not whatever it is. We all experience loss in different and profound daily ways. And therefore, we are all tempted. And there's sadness. There's sad. Whenever you experience loss, the reflexive reaction to loss is sadness. But in that moment of loss, I have to make a decision. Will I allow myself to be engulfed by the waves of sadness? Or will I say, yes, I feel sad, but I need to get up and I need to move myself forward? In those moments of sadness, in those moments of loss, we have to make an Abrahamic decision. Do I wallow in it and allow myself to get lost in it? And when that happens, as the Kotzker says, Me'atzvos lo tzomeach shum davar mo. Just know, when you allow yourself to fall into the clutches of sadness, you are investing in a field that cannot produce any vegetation, any crops, any produce. Sadness is that infertile field from which nothing else will come. Or do I choose to cling to the strength of my ancestor, to the strength of my father, Avram Avinu? Vayakam Avraham al pnei meso. Sometimes you have to make a decision to get up, dust yourself off. Say, of course, my heart is broken in a million pieces, but I'm not going to sit here and wallow in it. I'm not going to sit here and allow it to envelop me. Instead, I'm going to get up and I'm going to move myself forward. Avram Avinu made that choice, and because of that, we are here today. And if we're able to make that choice, there is no telling what we could do for ourselves and for future generations as well. Everything in this world has a time and has a place, except for sadness. Let us find the strength to, of course, mourn our losses, and then find the strength of Avram Avinu to get up and to move ourselves forward. Wishing everyone a good Erev Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh.